Trip planning is all about maximising your chances of catching fish by going at the right time. So we'll start off with timing, and we'll go out to like a year, and then we'll bring it right down to what time you should go during the day. So I've got a few notes here, and I will go through them one by one. So why is it important? Why is it important to trip planning? Because it maximises your chance of catching fish. So we haven't all got just time where we can just go whenever we want. So if you can identify times where your chances of catching fish are greater, you're maximising your chances of catching fish. And that's what I'm all about, is increasing my chances of catching fish. And I'd say trip planning would be the biggest one, because it can put you in the right place at the right time, and then the catching part is so much easier when the fish are there and they're biting. So first bit we'll go through is the annual cycle of fish movements in the Hauraki Gulf. And we'll start off with springtime. So springtime, it usually starts in September. The week before the full moon in September is normally when the spring fishing kicks off. So you want to mark that week in your calendar as to the start of spring fishing. It can vary a little bit, but generally it's around that time. So the week before the full moon and the first week of September is normally when the workups and the spring action out in the deep really starts to fire. So then we go through springtime from that week there, usually till about a week or before Christmas is full-on action. It's full on, and it's the best time of year to go fishing out in the deep when you're doing the workups and the workup fishing and the big snapper. So those times there. So when I'm looking through my year when I want to go fishing, that's the time that I want to do my workup fishing. And then we move into summertime. So the workups tend to slow down, the warm water moves in, and we get this warm body of hot water or warm water that's quite stable in the Hauraki Gulf and the Waitemata Harbour, which tends to shut down the out wide fishing, because pilchards don't like water that's too warm. So anything over 18 degrees, there's generally not too many pilchards there. So at that time of year, I start to come inshore, and I start to come into the channels, into the Rangi, Motahi, those kind of areas, and start fishing in there. Don't bother about going out wide so much. And what you'll notice is as soon as the out wide fishing shuts down, that's normally when the inshore fishing starts to fire. So during midsummer, I'm in the channels, I'm not going far out, and I'm doing the dragging that Mark explained before, because what's happened is the fish aren't feeding on the bait fish anymore. They've come into the channels and they're foraging around on the sea floor. So you won't find these big massive schools of fish on your sounder like you do out in the deep, but you'll find them grazing. And how I visualise it is like a herd of cows, and they're in a paddock and they're scattered around everywhere and they're foraging along the floor. So when you're looking for them on your sounder, you just see little specks now and then. So that's summertime fishing. Tend to be quite hard fishing as well. They're very finicky, they're hard to catch, and bite times can play a big role during summertime. It's probably the time that it would be my least favourite season for fishing is summertime. Which
on your chart there, where would you consider your line starting for your out wide fishing for spring?
Okay, so out wide fishing for spring is I would say as soon as you get past this kind of line here of the ring of the islands here, this is the out wide fishing. So when I'm talking about springtime workups, the best spot to go to is here, in between the two gannet colonies. That's where 90% of my workup fishing is here. I'm not going up here, I'm here just about all the time. It's the most consistent place to go workup fishing, especially in springtime. So that's the summertime fishing, and after that we have autumn. And that is anchovy time. So we get a big anchovy run all through here. All the anchovies move in, big clouds on your sounder. And that time of year, it's soft baiting time for us. It's kind of in the in-between area. So you're not in the channels. The fish are starting to move out, and they kind of get intercepted by all these anchovies that come in. So that's time to get down to your small lures and go soft baiting and chase down the anchovy schools. And they're really easy to find because you'll see the thousands upon thousands of shearwaters moving around the Gulf. But you have to be careful following the birds because what they do is they just fly around for miles and miles. I don't think they really know where they're going, really. It's when you see them, you're looking at your binoculars, they're all going one way. It's when you see them coming back and you see they're not all going the same way, they're going in all different directions. That means they found some bait fish and they're hunting them down in that area. So when I see shearwaters all going the same way, and like gannets, I'm not really that interested, but if I follow them through my binoculars and I see them coming back on themselves and starting to gather in a certain area, that's worth going over to. But just be careful, because if you follow shearwaters all over the inside here during autumn, you can go on a big mad chase all around the place. Hey, Mark. So yeah, anchovies are awesome, and you can get some big fish in these schools as well. But the problem can be kahawai as well. A good trick I've found for kahawai is fish behind the school where the snapper are lagging, or cast away. If you start catching them, when you start catching kahawai, they all tend to sit underneath the boat. If you can cast to the side, cast away from the kahawai, or actually move away from all the boiling fish, you'll tend to catch more snapper than kahawai. And then after that we get into, so during autumn time, the workups start up back again as well. So when the temperature starts to drop, gets below 18 degrees, the workups start again. So the workups tend to happen when the water temperature is changing. So in springtime when it's coming up, in autumn time when it's going down, those are good times for workup fishing. And then through winter time, what we do then is we go into the shallows, we go into reefy areas, and if you want to know where Mark and I go fishing quite a lot, if you just think of channels with fast water going in and out, with reefs on each side, that's where you'll find us, is on these reefs with the deep water channels close by and lots of water going in and out. That's where you'll find us catching most of our big fish during winter. And also during winter, there's workups as well. And the workups still happening, but you have to go out further. So when I'm searching for workups during winter, I'm coming right out to kind of these areas here, further out, between Anchorite and Horn, about 5 miles south of Anchorite. They're all good spots. You tend not to get them in this area here. You tend to get them out further. And just while I talk about this area here, quite often during this time, during autumn, you'll come out to here and there'll be all this action, there'll be all the shearwaters and turns and a few kahawai. And when that's happening, and you'll catch little snapper and heaps of kahawai, think to yourself, the fish are feeding and I'm going to go out to the next band of fish. And normally the next band of fish can be the snapper. So when you come out to here, all the action's happening, you're only catching kahawai little ones, go out further, and quite often you'll find that out further is proper workups happening. Yeah, so that's winter time. Is there any questions about that annual?
How much of a separation are you saying between those bands?
Quite a bit. So you'll come out to about 40 metres, and then you'll go on your boat and you go, there's nothing out here, nothing out here, nothing here, and just keep on going. I'd go, out to about here, and you can find there'll be another band of action. So it's worth doing those miles to check it out. Doesn't always work. Sometimes if it doesn't work, I'll come back to where I saw the pannies and the kahawai. But quite often there'll be another band of action out further with the bigger snapper. And you tend to find the further away you get from Auckland with the workup fishing, the bigger the fish are. So this area here, all along here, this is where you find me when I'm workup fishing, because I want the big ones. And especially living in Auckland, it's not that much further out to here. It's about the same as going to just past Flat Rock. So, spend your time down this area here. It's the best place I've found. Is there any questions on the annual cycle?
What do you call right now?
It's winter. Winter started, and it only started a few weeks ago because the season tended to be a bit late, but the water temperatures have only dropped in the past 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah, so we're in winter now. So out wide workups and in close soft baiting in the places with a high current, reefs on each side, those places. Or wash fishing as well. So that.
Prefer to chase the dolphins or the gannets if you're keeping out on the lookout for binoculars?
Gannets.
Gannets.
Yep. But you.
The gannets follow dolphins like half the time.
Yeah, they do. But you'll kind of pick up on which way everything's moving. And a little trick you can do if you've got a whole lot of gannets sitting on the water and you want to know which way they're going next, because what happens, they have a workup and then the dolphins go over here and then they have another workup and then the gannets follow them and they tend to go like that. So if you want to know which way the gannets are going to go next, if you just scare them with your boat a bit, what they'll do is they'll fly into the wind to take off like an aeroplane, and then they'll go in the direction they're going to go next. So that's a good little trick to figure out, where shall I go? I've found some gannets on the water, but I don't know which way to go next. Just make them fly. They'll take off into the wind, then they'll turn that way or that way. But make sure you wait until they turn, because they don't often just go straight into the wind and keep on going. So they'll get up high and then they'll turn. So that's the way you should go. Yeah.
How many points per gannet?
Yeah. Don't hurt them because they're our friends. They're our friends, the gannets. So that's the annual cycle. And now we'll go down to a month. So now you know the time to go. So the best time for me to go is the spring for out wide, and autumn, winter now for the big snapper and the shallows. Those are my two favourite times. Summer's not so good. Now go down to the monthly cycle of the moon, a new moon, full moon. When do you go during the month? So to me, there's a cycle there as well. And the week leading up to the full moon is normally the best pick of the month, in my opinion. Some people will say the week leading up to the new moon is the best part of the month. So the week leading up to the full moon, so it goes like this, it gets better and better. When the full moon hits, it's not always on the day of the full moon. It's somewhere around that time it shuts down. And I think because the variance can be a day either side of the full moon, and what has got to do with the cloud cover at night time, because what the theory is they feed on the full moon, but if there's cloud cover around, there's no light for them to feed. So that's why I think it varies a little bit. So around that time, it'll shut down, like big time. Like you can go from catching heaps to catching nothing overnight. So there's a cycle, it goes up to that, and then it drops away. So that period there, I don't bother going fishing. I don't plan any trips with anyone. I don't want to go fishing in that period there, because my chances of catching fish have declined a lot. And then it'll start to build up again to the new moon. So that week before the full moon, the new moon, is another good period. So that's my second favourite period. So now I've got like 10 days during the month which I know are going to be better. So those are the dates I want to go fishing. So once again, it leads up to the new moon, and then when the new moon hits, there's a period around that time where it shuts down again. So I don't want to go then either. So you can even narrow it down, because it tends to build up just before it collapses, so you can narrow it down to a few days during each month where you're going to increase your chances of catching fish. So you can plan this a long way ahead. You can plan this a long way ahead of when you need to have some excuses to go fishing, So that breaks it down to the monthly cycle. Is there any questions about that bit? No, so now you've got annual, you've got monthly. And now daily. So daily. So when are you going to go during the day? So there's also a cycle with the moon with bite times, which you'll see on calendars. You'll see on calendars. So the calendars are good, especially the ones done by Eric Moorman. They're based on the moon. And his theory is 2 hours before the moon goes down is when the fish start biting. and they bite through, and then they have another bite when it's directly below the boat, and pretty much when the moon's up in the sky, it's not so good. So you want to go fishing when you can't see the moon in the sky. So you can work that out with moon tables and bite times. Yeah. So now you're down to, when should I go fishing during the day? So now you've got the moon. So let's talk about tides now. So tides, the moon and the tide are related. And what I've found with tides is there's 2 feeding periods as well per tide. And people say fish when the tide is flowing. That's true, but you can narrow it down more than that. You can narrow it down more than that. I reckon when the current first kicks in, the fish go, yay, the tide's kicked in, I'm going to have a bit of a feed. Yeah? So when it first starts, they have a feed. When it's at its peak during mid-flow, and it's just a constant flow, I reckon they still feed, but they don't feed as hard. So you get a little bit of time there. Then the best bit is when the tide starts to slow down and the fish are going, oh no, the tide's starting to slow down, I better have a feed. That's the best bit. So you'll find a lot of the bite time calendars, a lot of the bite times are 2 hours before the end of the tide. So that's narrowing it down once again to what part of the tide you should be there. So if you could only go fishing for 2 hours in a day, I would be going the last 2 hours of the tide when it's stopping, not when it's starting, when it's stopping. So now you're down to 2 hours a day of that, the best time to be there. And I reckon the outgoing tide is better than the incoming. So the best time of the day for me for fishing is the last 2 hours of the outgoing tide, as far as tides go. So then we have to start thinking about, so now we've got our moon, we've got our tide, and now there's other variables as well. So the next one is the wind. So the wind, ideally, we want to have the wind and the current going the same way. So generally in Auckland here, southwester means outgoing tide. Incoming means northerly, northeast, that kind of area, that kind of direction. So if you get them all going the same way, for your lure fishing and your stray lining, which Mark is going to talk about next, so much better. Try stray lining when the wind and current are going the wrong way. It doesn't work, because you're fishing around your anchor. And if you actually look on the chart here, you can quite often pick a place where the wind and tide will be going the same way. Because remember, currents bend around places. There's all, it goes this way here, it goes this way here. So you can just look on your chart. It's incoming, it goes this way, it goes this way. It might bend around bits like that, Remember the water flow from Tiri, it kind of goes in like that, So what I do when I'm going stray lining is I go, okay, the wind's coming this way. What's my tide going to be? It's going to be outgoing, so this way. So pretty easy to figure out that you want to be fishing into structure and stuff. So it's pretty easy. You want to fish along here, you want to fish along there, you want to fish into there. So the tide and the wind's keeping your boat and your burley going into something. If you can't always get that, a good trick, if you can't always get it, is to use your sea anchor when you're stray lining I hope I'm not putting your, oh sorry. Mark will tell you about it a bit more too, because I think I'm stealing the subject. When you anchor, is to put your sea anchor out. When you're anchored, when you're stray lining, and it'll take away the effect of the wind, and you'll start to hang in the current more. And just look, but also look for areas where the current bends around places, where you might be able to fish. It might be wind against tide around here, but somewhere else it might not be, because there's so many different channels and places you can do it. So try and get the wind and the current going the same way. And another thing about current is look for upwellings. Look for the current hits some structure or a bank or just a wee rise and starts to come up. Like a classic example is these fingers here off flat rock. So these These are all fingers. So what that is a little canyon like that in the seabed, but it ends there. So on the incoming tide, the water's going to travel down this little canyon. It's going to start coming up around here, so the upwelling is going to be around here, and that's where the snapper will be. If you went to that spot when the tide's going out, it's not going to be the same because there's no upwelling. But if you went somewhere else with the outgoing tide, you could go to, where could you go on the outgoing tide? You might be able to go, you know, Shearers or somewhere around there and fish into that. And because the current's heading and going up. So you look for current, you look for, and down here, the tide's going out. The water's going to go upwelling around here. So that'd be another good spot. So you're planning where you should go for each tide to fish upwellings as well if you're out in the deeper water here. Is there any questions on that bit? Okay. Also, so when you're looking at tides as well, the size of the tide. On spring tides, on big tides, 3.2 metre tides, you're going to get a lot more current water flow in and out. So that means you can fish areas where there's not so many channels and stuff, and you're still going to get current. And a classic example of that is the Mokohenia Islands. Because it's such a long way out and there's no land close by, the current is slight out there. So when you get a big current day, go to those further out places because there's going to be more current than normal and the fish should be feeding. So Mokohenia Islands, really important to have a day where there's a big current, because if you go when there's hardly a small tide with hardly any current, out at the moment there's hardly any current at all. Now you always want the current flowing when you're fishing, and so another tactic you can do is if you're fishing out here and the current stops, the fish shut down. They're going to shut down. Sometimes you can whiz in to an area like this in between two islands and you'll find a bit more current for another half hour or so. So, you know, when it stops at here, come in between two islands or in between two land masses and try and pick up that last bit of current to give yourself another half hour of fishing. So that quite often works quite well. So, weather. So you want to look for weather windows. You want to look for dips in the wind, for drift fishing for lures. You know, ideally you want about 5-10 knots, everything going the same way. Internet, Swell Map's really good for that. Swell Map's really good. I think I put a post on my Facebook on Friday with a forecast, a drop in the wind tomorrow for about 5 hours. Now, other websites might not forecast that because they're on the safety side of everything, and so they won't forecast that small dip. So research your weather really well. If you're a keen fisherman, you want to know what's happening with the weather all the time because it can change overnight. You know, just last week or 2 weeks ago, Mark and I were going to go fishing, and we looked on the internet at about lunchtime. We said, "No, let's can it. It's no good." Woke up in the morning, it's calm. It's fat calm. We're going, "Oh, damn! Wish we had gone." So, check the weather often. I have it on my phone, so I just hit the button for Swell Map, and I've got it set at, I think I've got one set for D'Urville, one set for Takatu, so I'm always knowing what the weather's going to do because it can change. The forecast can change from 20 knots to 10 knots in 6 hours, and so don't miss out on those opportunities because you haven't been in touch with what's going on with the weather. So Swell Map, Met's View, Met Service for a general overlook, but Swell Map's better, because that's more for they've got graphs and you can see the dips in the wind. Another trick that we do when we're charter fishing, this is just a bit of some trip planning for you. If it's a northeasterly wind, anything from an east or east-southeast round to a northeast, this coastline down here is sheltered, and you tend to find that the fish it's good fishing in those winds, but the problem is you have to beat your way across to here to get there. So what we do when we're charter fishing, we've got a little trick, and we come down through the inside of Tamaki Strait here, and often I'll go right down through this gap here, come out here, and then I'm beam on up to there. I'm beam on the boat so I don't have to pound into it, so I can get over here quite easily. And it's normally just a short trip. How far is that? That is 5 miles across, so you might have 4 miles of rougher weather, but as soon as you get over to here, it's beautiful. So on those days, especially if you're in a fishing tournament or something, and it's northeasterly and it's all rough along these beaches here, if you can do that, pop over to here, you can often get some really good fishing over here, and then it's just a matter of riding the waves home. So that's a good strategy in an easterly wind. And during the work-up season, when the northeasterlies tend to happen, or these easterlies, you'll find that the work-ups can be in the shelter. So if it's an easterly, they will be along here. But I've found it in an east-southeasterly, when it's coming from this direction, they can often be in this little patch here where there's no wind. So they like the shelter as well. So that's another good trick for fishing Coromandel in an easterly wind. So what's the best winds? I don't like southerlies. I don't like southeasterlies. Southerlies, southeasterly, all blown. I'll can a fishing trip if it's a southeasterly, because it's cold and it's miserable and there's nowhere to get any shelter really, and the fish tend to close down. So southeasterly, I don't bother. Easterly, love easterlies, love northeasterlies. Northwester, the fish can bite, but it's quite lumpy in most places. So northwest is kind of an average kind of wind. Southwest is good, but just be careful. My saying is don't trust the southwesterly in Auckland, because it can come up quite quickly southwesterly. So I don't trust them, but they still can be good for fishing. So my favourites are easterlies, northeasterlies, and this is where I'm over here. You get easterlies, northeast, especially if you can have a light northeasterly wind. Look out for this light northeasterly to easterly wind, 10 knots, incoming tide. Get over here. Just go there. If you can get over there, just go straight there, because this is where we catch most of our big fish. This is my favourite. This from there to there would be my favourite place to go and catch snapper. I love it there. It's just fantastic. I think it's because it's there's not too many boats there, but there's all this there's current rips around here. There's a big canyon there, and it's just a really fantastic area. It's a very consistent area.
Is that anchoring up?
If you're stray lining, yep, good areas for stray lining, but you have to have incoming tide here on the northeasterly and outgoing on the southwesterly, but southwest is not so good unless it's light, because it's a bit rougher over here and you have to beat your way home again. So, easterly, northeast, I tend to go over here. I love it when I can see the northeasterly coming. I'm straight over there. So that's wind direction. So now you want to go, where do you go then? So how do you keep up with the where the fish are? And some good ways to do that is keep up to date on the Ocean Angler Facebook page, and make sure you join the email list, so we give you the information as we get it. Damo out there, he gives us good information, so keep up to date with that. Also, when you're out there, there's VHF channels you can listen to. You can listen to Channel 1, that's kind of the Great Barrier region, and you can listen to Channel 6 too. That's what all the charter boats chatter on in Auckland. And when you hear them changing channels, just follow them. They go, "G'day, Doug, change to Channel 10," or just change to Channel 10. Or if they say go up, just go up, or go down until you find them, or push scan or something until you find which channel, because they can sometimes say, "Oh, I'm going up, Bob," and then it'll actually be going down. So it's a bit of a game of cat and mouse. So that's another good way to find fish. Another good way is the Dolphin Explorer boat. He leaves downtown about 12:30 every day. He's normally going past Noises or Tirri at about 1:30. He doesn't mind if you follow him, as long as you don't, go and ruin his workouts from him. He really doesn't mind. So if you, at lunchtime, 1 o'clock, if you're in those areas, keep a lookout for him and just follow him out, because he's absolutely the master at finding workups. And I do that a lot. I just wait for him, and he will just drive straight there and just follow him. And he really doesn't mind. So, he's another good way to find fish. Then get yourselves a group. We've got a group of guys, and we share information freely. And when we're out there, we we'll text each other, or at the end of the day, we'll email each other and say, oh, fishing was really good here, mate. And I find once you start giving out the information, it all starts coming back to you. So what I'm going to do, just as a trial, so I'm going to, at the next week, I'll email you all the people sitting here, so you've all got contact with each other. So if you feel like sharing your information and starting a little group up that can make a huge difference, because instead of trying to find them by yourself, you've got a whole lot of guys going out and you're sharing information, and you keep this tight little group of people, and that's another good way to find fish and to keep your ear on the pulse kind of deal. So be prepared to change plans if the wind changes. I was just talking before about how the forecast can change and what you think's going to happen, and you wake up in the morning and it's not the case. So be prepared for that to happen and change your plans accordingly. Don't have your plan so set in stone that you're not going to change it. Don't do that. Just have an idea. Okay, if this happens, I'm going to go there. If something else happens, just have a kind of a backup plan, just so you know what else you can do. So don't be stuck in your plan too much. So now start to look out for, over winter you get these primo days of fishing, these big highs, perfectly round ones, move over the country, and you get these really fantastic days for fishing. So over winter, look out for these big highs. You can see them, they're on Australia, and start to say, well, it's coming soon, I'm going to get out there, because the winter fishing can be fantastic. That's when Mark and I do a lot of fishing, because we know we're going to catch. We had a bigger fish. We had a run last winter. We were catching a 20-pounder about 4 trips in a row, mate, something like that. We were just catching big fish all the time. Winter fishing's fantastic. So now you know when the cycles during the year. You know the monthly cycle of the moon. You know the daily cycle of the moon. You know the tides, wind and tide together. And what's the other one? I think there's one more. You know how to find them. So that, pardon me? Yep, well, you've got to plan that in too. So you can actually plan it on your calendar. In the primo weeks coming up, you can get your flowers ordered. So your flowers ordered, because so you can plan it. You can plan way out. You can plan the times to go fishing, take time off work, organise those things, and that's trip planning in a nutshell. And so I'll take a few questions. Okay, great. Pardon me? Pier 21. Yeah.
It takes you quite an amount of time to get out there.
Yep. Takes about an hour and a half to get there. Yeah.
Does the Dolphin Explorer only go to Turi and the Noises?
No, he goes out here a lot too. Oh, just one other thing. Workups in springtime, when it's around that full moon time, because the tides are going in and out quite a bit further, often the workups will be down here around that full moon. We don't know why, but we just kind of know. So during that full moon, down here.
Hey Paul, not being in the 20-pound club myself, so with the workups, do you generally find you'll get a certain size of fish most of the time? Like you don't get the 20-pounders and stuff like that. There, do you have to go sort of, or do you?
Yeah, I've seen 20-pounders caught in workups, and it's that those weeks before the full moon in spring. So September, October, November, those few days before the full moon is your best chance of catching a big one on the workups. So those are the times you want to go. So there's 3 days, September, October, November, that you could go and target the big ones in the workups. Would be the best time to go.
Do they move around the edges of the workups?
I think it's just random, really. I think they're just in there, and it's just random. Mm.
Yeah, Paul, they're kind of different then too, aren't they? Like they're different to the ones we're catching in the shallows, aren't they?
Yeah, they're big, like pink schoolies with sharp teeth, and they're not resident fish in the reefs, and they're beautiful pink fish, sharp teeth. All they eat is pilchards, and different type of fish. Mm. I reckon they do. It's funny, because I reckon the most tasty snapper are the ones we catch off Devonport Naval Base there. Yeah. So I think it's because they're eating all the crabs and mussel, but they're real tasty, those ones, for some reason. Eh? Yeah. Everyone goes, oh, they taste really good out wide. Oh, yeah, but those ones taste real good. Yeah. So that's trip planning, just a short segment on when to go fishing. So thanks.